Yep.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to World Fringe Day. Happy World Fringe Day to you all.
Fringe Day.
How are you? We've got Erica from Rochester, Amy from Montreal, and Elena from Fringe NYC. Why don't, Erica, you start and let us know a bit about yourself and your Fringe Festival?
Sure. So our Fringe is going into its seventh year this year. We actually just announced all of our tickets. We put all of our tickets on sale yesterday and announced our entire lineup. So I did finally have a good night's sleep last night, so that was nice.
Well done.
Thanks. So our festival is in September every year. This year we've actually expanded to 11 days, so we'll be September 12th through the 22nd. Start on a Wednesday and end on a high on a Saturday.
Right.
We're a multidisciplinary festival, so everything from theater to comedy to music to dance to children's entertainment to shows that can't even be classified. Unlike other festivals, but most similar in the U.S. to Philadelphia, we're a bifurcated Fringe. So half of the festival, well, actually more than half, is curated by the venues themselves, just like Edinburgh, using the Edinburgh model totally. And then we have a smaller section that Fringe itself curates. Those tend to be headliners. And then one other thing that makes us unique is we do something that we call Friday and Saturday on the Fringe. And we bring in a big outdoor spectacle show every year. So something very different that people aren't seeing anywhere in the region. And we put on a free show. And our idea for that, the reason that we do it is, well, there are many reasons. One is that we want to provide access to the arts. Another reason is we want to get people downtown. So getting people to downtown Rochester can still be a challenge. And so what we say is we're going to kind of lure them downtown and then keep them downtown. So we hope that they come down for that big spectacle performance and then filter out to the venues. And that has worked. That philosophy has worked for us.
And that must be diversifying your audience quite a lot.
It is. It's actually a huge range of all sorts of different types of people that attend those shows. It's really heartwarming to see. So we have we say the young to the young at heart.
Yeah, nice. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Young to the young. I'm writing it down, look. Amy, why don't you tell us about Montreal Fringe?
Sure. Well, so Montreal Fringe, we actually just wrapped ours up. Our festival takes place every June in Montreal. And I'm the executive and artistic director, which is so much fun. And what makes us unique is that we're actually a bilingual Fringe festival. We have quite a large component of Francophone work and non-language specific work at our Fringe because we are in Montreal, which is the largest Francophone city in all of North America. Our model that we use is the CAF model. So we program by lottery. The artists get 100% of their box office back to them, and the work is completely uncensored, of course. And tickets are always affordable for audiences, $10 or less. And what I find really interesting, and one of the reasons why I love what you're doing today, actually, is I always find a real Fringe is a true reflection of the city that it takes place in.
Yeah.
And I find, especially in Montreal, we have so many amazing art schools and so many different kinds of artists that it's really moved. Although it's still rooted in theater, which is where we began in Montreal, it's really evolved to become a multidisciplinary festival rooted in performance. So we have more music, a lot of dance, especially contemporary dance. It's really interesting to see that kind of curve evolve over time here.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they do. And you're right. Fringe festivals do seem to reflect. One, the person that runs them, I think, has got a lot of personality in their Fringe festival, but also it has to fulfill the needs of its surrounding and its home, really. And talking of that, Elena, you've recently slightly changed your structure, so why don't you tell us what you've been going through and about your Fringe?
Well, we cheated off Erica and Philly. We're now bifurcated as well. So in 2017, we took a year off from doing an actual festival, or a year on doing what we call the Blank Canvas Project, and did convenings and conversations. Some of our fellow World Fringe members were really generous with their time and contributed their ideas and some of their secrets. And so we started from scratch, starting a Fringe festival in New York City and building it in what we thought was the best way for New York City now, after having celebrated our 20th annual Fringe NYC. Yeah. So the New York International Fringe Festival is now Fringe NYC, a smaller, still adjudicated, venue provided, very hands-on festival in Manhattan, and Fringe BYOV, which is the open access model. It's bring your own venue. And there are several ways to bring your own venue. Existing year-round indie theaters, in order to support them, can curate or lottery or however they want to select their artist, and their shows can be a part of the festival. Or alumni of Fringe NYC who've got this down, know how it's done, can do pop-up independent spaces. Nice. So it's really built, we think, to support our existing indie theater community. Rather than, outside promoters or presenters as much. So for our international audience, internationals would still apply for Fringe NYC so that we can do all of the visa work that's required ahead of time, all of that kind of stuff. But for locals and nationals, you can choose either option. It really is up to you, whatever is the best for your show. So we still have crazy performance times, kind of random schedules, 10 to 14 shows sharing each venue in our Manhattan venue home for Fringe NYC. But if you want just straight up 8 p.m. curtains for your huge installation of a show, then BYOB in any of the other boroughs and be a part of the festival. And the other changes, we're now in October, so you can all come.
That is a really big change. Yeah, and so you're working up to the start of your new structure and your new way of working. That's really
exciting. We have our Fringe NYC town meeting is on Saturday, actually, which is great.
Oh, good luck with that. And two of you have started your Fringe festivals, and Amy, you inherited yours. I mean, what was it that kind of drew you to Fringe and kind of made you want to take control, not control because you can't control them, champion and lead the way in Fringe? Amy, you've got a great story, why don't you tell us?
Sure. Well, when I was 17, I kind of stumbled into the Fringe. Our festival takes place in the Plateau Montreal, which is a very famous artist neighborhood. And I was walking up our main street, Saint Laurent Boulevard, and I could hear all this noise coming from just further up the street. And I remember walking closer and closer to the noise and to the music and walking into this really cool beer tent, and everyone was talking to each other, and suddenly people were talking to me and asking me about shows, and I didn't really know what was going on. And it hit me right away that I was being invited into a gang, but a good gang, not a bad gang. A group of people that cared about what I had to say about things. I was 17 and hadn't really experienced that before. And before I knew it, somebody just kind of pointed me out in the crowd and said hey, we need a volunteer at the info booth. Do you want to come do it? And I was like, I don't know, sure.
You were just kind of grabbed off the street there.
Pretty much. And so I started volunteering, and I did shows over the years, and I begged Jeremy, who was my predecessor, to hire me at the theater that we run, Mainline Theater, and he hired me to build IKEA furniture and clean the bathrooms because I just begged him for work, and then eventually it all worked out.
Yes, amazing. Erica, what drew you to starting a Fringe festival?
Well, I had as you know, I lived in the UK for about 10 years and I had my own production company in London. So I had a lot of experience producing at the Edinburgh Fringe, which I loved. And I always thought every time I would return to the US, I thought, gosh, Rochester has a lot of college students, a lot of university students, a big, really, really big art scene that a lot of nationally known groups that were actually based in Rochester because it was cheaper, rehearsal space, but weren't necessarily even performing in Rochester. So I thought it would be a good place for a Fringe. And what happened was, in 2009, I happened to be back in Rochester, just actually on a vacation, and I was talking to the head of the theater department at the University of Rochester, and I was just catching up with him, and I said, why do you think it is that Rochester doesn't have a Fringe festival? Because I knew that they were popping up, all over the place. And he said, it's funny you should ask that. The president of the university is working on this concept right now. He's been working on it for a year. There's a steering committee that's been going. I thought, oh my gosh. So I went and I attended one of these meetings. But I just actually was there as an observer. I wasn't thinking I was going to leave the UK or, I declared I was never moving back, all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting in this room and, again, these people have been meeting for an entire year, and they brought some consultants down from Toronto who'd done a feasibility study. They paid them really a lot of money. And anyway, at the end of their presentation, the head of our local PBS affiliate said, it's a really great study, but I think you've studied Rochester, Minnesota. So they'd studied the wrong city.
Oh my God! Oh, that's amazing.
And then, so I'm sitting there, and then this woman said, and I'm not going to mention her name, but she said, quote, I'll never forget this. She said, quote, I just want this to be just like the Edinburgh Fringe where you can bring your child to any show. And I, made a face like, I made a face like that, like I know. And then I said, I don't know how many of you have produced at the Edinburgh Fringe. No one. I directed, no one. Performed, no one. I said, has anyone here been to the Edinburgh Fringe? And that one woman said, yes, I went once for a day. And I thought, a day? So I actually I said at that, as the meeting was over, and the president of the University of Rochester was leaving, he was getting into an elevator. I actually caught him as he was getting into the elevator, and I said, if you want a Fringe festival, I want to come back and run it. Yeah. Thank you, Erica. And then the doors closed, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. So then he asked me to put together a proposal. And I did.
Right there. Well done.
It was literally, yeah. That's what happened.
Elena, tell us about how you started doing what you're doing.
Well, we were this tiny little theater company, the present company, a group, ensemble of actors, and our artistic director, John Clancy, and we had a show that we were doing on the Lower East Side, which was the home of indie theater at the time in Manhattan, called Americana Absurdum. Mm-hmm. And our peers said, it's great, you should take it to Edinburgh. And we said, what's Edinburgh? And started to look into getting the 12 of us to Scotland, if we could get time off work, to go for more than a day, like as Erica points out. And it was just cost prohibitive. We couldn't afford to get to Scotland to do our show. And so John Clancy, our founding artistic director, I call it the great head thunker. It was sort of like, well, wait a minute, why are we going to Scotland? All of us have moved to New York to start careers in theater, and there's this burgeoning scene sort of on the Lower East Side. We should be cooperating and all doing this festival at one time here in the city and trying to get some attention for off-Broadway in what's a pretty heavily saturated media market. So we did. And we started the Fringe sort of accidentally, and did Americana Absurdum at that first festival and quickly said, you know what, we can never do a show in this festival again because that was too hard and not a good idea. So, so that was that. And it's interesting, a lot of the folks that were around in the late 90s on the Lower East Side are now our alumni association founders, and a lot of them are, you know, bringing their own venues to this new bifurcated model, and it's kind of great. It works. We think it's going to work for a lot of folks.
Yeah, amazing.
Oh, well done.
And you three are like the Fringe triangle, in actual fact. I've just looked on a map and you're almost equidistant from each other in a perfect triangle. So you could like travel to each other.
Absolutely.
I know, I haven't had the pleasure to go to either of your festivals, and we should make it happen.
Yeah,
absolutely. And thank you so much for your generosity in hosting us last year in Montreal.
Oh,
that was
yeah.
wonderful.
That's amazing. What about
It
your
was my
apartment,
pleasure.
Elena? You had like the best apartment in the whole city, didn't you?
Oh, well, if you could hear the construction noise outside, you might not agree, but.
We did have a nice party. We did have a nice party there.
The Julian Caddy was like P. Diddy with his jacuzzi in his bedroom. It was really funny. Before
That's
we
a show.
go, because it is World Fringe Day, and so I wanted to kind of hear from you why you feel Fringe festivals are important and why they're important on this global scale as well. As a global network, obviously they're all really small or big, all different sizes, but as a kind of movement, a Fringe movement, why are they important? Amy?
I think that the movement is important because it's all about the artists, and there's so much new work that comes out of a Fringe festival. And we're sort of in a time where there's so many voices and thoughts and opinions artists really want to share, and we need to have an unfiltered place where they can do that to help shape the future voices of theater across the world.
Yeah, thank you. Totally agree with that. Erica, why are Fringes important to you?
Well, I totally agree. You know, of course, all of the models are different. And when you set up a Fringe festival yourself, you soon learn that there's no cookie cutter approach, which in some ways would be easier if we could just be handed one model. This is how you do it. But something that unites, of course, all Fringe festivals is, as Amy said, this lack of censorship and the desire to give artists a platform. So I think everyone, all Fringes worldwide, you know, I don't know of a single one that isn't trying to really help the artists get a leg up, whether they're starting off in their careers or whether they've been at it for years, as we say, from amateur to superstar. But also, I think especially in this current political environment, the fact that we do have this sort of event where shows and artists can speak their minds without fear of repercussion from the festival organizers.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, quite. Brilliant. Elena, why are they important to you?
Here, here, gals. I think that's all a part of it. I think one of the things I love about it, and I love about this World Fringe community, is that people are so hungry for community right now. And I think it's made the Fringe festivals across the globe even that much more important. It feels like, you know, I think Amy's experience of kind of getting grabbed off the street and pulled in to be a part of that community is almost universal at Fringe festivals. There's something about them, and this community of communities is really important, especially now, as Erica said. It's a place where people listen to each other and tend to be more open-hearted, and that goes across the board from the artists to the volunteers that none of us would survive without, and our beloved audiences, and our mutual audience. You know, we're starting to have sort of a group of folks who go from fringe to fringe, and they're incredibly important to all of us. So, so thank you from all of us.
Thank you, more like. Thank you, all of you, and happy World Fringe Day to all of you. It's amazing to see you all here. And
we'll all be getting together. We're getting together later to raise a glass. So thank you.
We will. Hooray! Product.
We already started.
Or later too.
Yeah.
It's happy hour somewhere.
Happy World Fringe Day.
Bye.